Chasm Converses.
Hello listeners, welcome to Chasm Converses, the place where I discover, meet and talk to creative people and artists from all over the world. We're into the final week of my sessions from London, and my guest this week hails from Cornwall in England. It's Nathan Ball. He is an incredible singer-songwriter who has just released a brand new song called Lover's Game that you should check out right after the conversation. For this conversation, however, he joins me from Amsterdam whilst on tour of Europe. We talk through his music releases and he shares with me some incredible insights into his songs, his love for songwriting, and his passion for connecting with his ever-growing fan base, as well as his love for Australia and a tour he had there with Ziggy Alberts. He will mesmerize you with his soothing voice and take you on a wholesome journey of discovery. Here is Nathan Ball. Nathan Ball, welcome to Chasm Converses.
Thanks so much. Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Again, it's wonderful to have you here on a lovely early rising Sunday morning. Whereabouts are you joining me from today?
I'm at my friend's house in Amsterdam. We had a couple of shows in I can't remember where it was, Denmark over the weekend, and then I'm playing some shows in Amsterdam. So I thought I'd just fly here early from Denmark. So yeah, it's a nice sunny day, and yeah, it's all is good.
That's fantastic. That's so cool, man. I was actually with a friend last night who just came back from Amsterdam and was telling me all about all the cool stuff that's over there to do. So I mean, I haven't been there before myself, but it's a place I'd absolutely love to go. So you're on tour right now, then I suppose, yeah?
Yeah. It's been pretty wild. Got 3 sort of overlapping tours. I'm singing with Faithless at the moment and supporting a guy from your neck of the woods, I believe, Ziggy Alberts.
Oh, right. Okay, cool. Nice.
And then also got a solo tour, and they're all sort of intertwining at the moment, which is so far going well, but I'm waiting for a missed flight or something and it all to sort of implode. But
oh, yeah, no, Jake, it's just some sort of thing to go wrong for it all. All that can sort of converging, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, well, hopefully, hopefully nothing goes wrong. That's fantastic to know, man. How have the shows been? When it comes to touring and performing on stage, is that something that you just obviously love to do? And is it great to be able to perform in front of a bunch of people that, might know your stuff, but also who may not know your stuff?
Yeah, it's been amazing. I've sort of been doing it for, I guess, been playing in bands and whatever for 10 years now. And yeah, sort of comes as second nature, which is nice. Don't get too nervous anymore, but definitely get the sort of butterflies before you go on. And yeah, it's been wicked. The support shows I really love. They're you get the chance to play to 90% of a crowd that don't know who you are. And if you win over 1% of them, that's great. And any more than that is also a bonus. So yeah, really enjoying it. The show's been really fun. The weather's been glorious. Yeah, can't complain at all.
It's been actually an amazing summer because I just came back from Ireland, just traveling around there, just seeing the place. And yeah, it was literally just so beautiful there the entire time. So the European summer has honestly been amazing. It's been awesome for festivals. I myself am going to a music festival today in Gunnersbury. Korn's coming to play with Spirit Box and a bunch of other bands. And I bought the tickets. Yeah, and I bought the tickets last year, so I'm keen for that. But apparently it's going to be 25, 26 degrees today, which is bright sunshine. So it's basically just going to be any other usual festival in Australia, really, compared to what it is usually. But it's going to be awesome all the same, man. But I'd love to jump in and ask you about your music and talk to you about sort of, I guess, your inspirations behind the songs that you write and also how you sort of got yourself into music. So did you sort of start music sort of when you were younger, growing up, or did you sort of fall into music a bit later on in life?
I bought a guitar when I was 14 and just started writing songs straight away on that. And I had a guitar teacher at school who, I think he was in a tribute band to The Who, and sort of he taught me about 3 chords and then would spend 29 minutes of the half-hour lesson just shredding these solos. And I was it was literally on his knees doing these solos. And I was no, I want to be able to do that. This isn't a lesson for you to show me how good you are.
Yeah.
Yeah, they didn't last very long, the lessons, but yeah, just kept sort of playing and writing songs, and yeah, played in like started bands at school and stuff, and yeah, I've sort of taught myself guitar, which has been a interesting process. I'm by no means sort of in any way technically trained. I just know where my ear sort of wants the chords to go.
Yeah.
Right around that, which is great. Yeah, and then played in a band, and then did the solo thing, which just sort of slowly started ticking along, and I just started touring a lot with that, and organically picked up some fans that sort of let me keep touring.
Yeah.
And yeah, sort of brought me to where we are today. It's doing the faceless stuff as well. It's quite strange being in a new band, which I haven't done for forever really. It's like playing
surely.
songs, which is it's weird. It's also like playing iconic songs that I grew up listening to, and now we're on stage playing them to thousands. Pretty wild.
That's always a very weird thing. Like I'm in like a heavy metal band myself, and every now and then we like we'll throw a cover in like the set or something like that, and even that still like throws me if I'm like covering a song that I've been listening to since I was like 15, and now it's like, oh my god, I'm like screaming this on stage to like a bunch of people. It's just it really does something to you, like just to your heart, and just like when you're out there sort of performing it to people, and you hope you're doing it justice. You hope you're doing the song justice to all the people that know it obviously so well from the artist that it comes from.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just that's sort of my job at the moment, try not to butcher it too much and make sure it goes well.
Absolutely. So did you grow up in England?
Yeah, grew up in England, just sort of about an hour outside of London, and then slowly, progressively moved further southwest, and I now live in Cornwall, which is right at the bottom bit, I guess the closest to sort of Oz that we get in the UK. Live by the beach and get to surf a lot. It's beautiful. It's a great place.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's awesome that you're able to like, obviously even like be able to like travel and tour and go to different countries and like have that like that want to go overseas, knowing if, like, even though if it's like, far to go or any of that kind of stuff. Because you went to Australia, I think, sort of recently, didn't you?
Yeah. I went in October, November. Been lucky to sort of go every year now for the last maybe like 8 years, I think.
Yeah. Because obviously over there's like beach culture is amazing, and obviously surf culture is fantastic, especially if it's around like, sort of Sydney or like Brisbane sort of area. Like, that's all the real kind of like awesome beaches are. So that would obviously be incredible for you to go down there and sort of like enjoy. I mean, obviously you go down there to tour and that kind of stuff as well. But if it was for a holiday, you'd be in the prime sure down there.
Yeah. I actually kind of do both. My brother lives in Sydney. He moved there like
sick.
10 years ago. And so, try and combine a tour with a holiday every time, which is pretty glorious. Yeah, just go to Sydney for a few months, and they're moving up to like Byron area. So I'm sure I'll be touring at least 5 times a year there now.
That's so cool, man. Yeah, I'm from from Adelaide, so just sort of like South Australia. The beaches there are still also very, very nice. They're not as crowded, I don't think, as the ones up on the East Coast. Sorry, mainly because the East Coast is like quite highly populated, I suppose, but still like a really nice place. I'd love to ask you when it comes to like touring and stuff, because obviously you're lived in England, wrote your songs there. When it comes to touring and like going out, I guess for the first time to new places and sort of showing your music to new people and performing in front of new audiences, is it something that it's because you've got heaps of plays on like Spotify, heaps of followers and fans? Is it something that you just have to kind of keep on doing and keep up appearances, going to these places, performing for fans, so that older fans will appreciate you being there as well as bringing along new fans? Is it something that you just have to kind of keep kind of doing in order to build up your fan base?
I think so. Yeah, I think if you want sort of genuine organic fans that are going to stick around for a while, I think probably in the last 5 to 10 years, there's sort of been cheap shortcuts that have been introduced, like Instagram, and certainly TikTok is Yeah, I think about it a lot. If you want to have like a live business and tour a lot, and you want to sell tickets, you've got to build, you've got to show up, put on a good show, and create something that people want to come back to. Whereas I guess there's a lot of like flash in the pan success things now, of like people that are like overnight known by more people than me already. Like just a
Yeah.
song goes viral and millions of people see it.
Yeah.
But then they can't necessarily sell out sort of even like 100 cap venue,
True.
because they haven't sort of put in the time and have never played live. I guess. Well, maybe they have, but
Yeah.
sort of thinking about things that just immediately go viral.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I talk to a lot of people and I interview a lot of musicians and stuff on my podcast. And a lot of them are kind of singer-songwriter solo artists. Some from, I mean, a lot of them are from Australia, some of them are from sort of all over the world. Um, but with yourself, it seems like you've really found a real great niche to be able to go overseas and put on shows, put out like singles, have them get so much attention around them, mainly from fans that have stayed with you, as you said, since you've been able to go to new places and keep going back to these places and keeping appearances. I would like to ask, like, what I guess would your main advice be to singer-songwriters that may have just like kind of started off doing this, that kind of want to have that, organic fan base or keep up those listens and that sort of stuff around the audience, seeing as you've been doing this for quite a long time now? Maybe you have some real good ideas or some real good, like, pointers, I guess, that you could give.
Yeah, I would say just stick to it. Just keep touring. Also, I think my main bit of advice would be to, like, when I was starting out, the industry was like the biggest thing for me. I was like, because that's all I ever knew. I was like, I think you just sort of sign a big record deal and make sure you're with the biggest promoter like Live Nation, and make sure you have a big agent and stuff. But at the end of the day, it comes down to like, if you actually have the songs that, like, there's only so much they can do. And actually, if you're the smallest fish in a massive pond, you're just going to sink to the bottom and you're not their biggest interest. And so I actually started last year, was it last year? Maybe a couple of years ago. Just thought I'd escape the industry for a bit and just try and get direct to fans, because I feel like that's sort of where the music model's going, like just creating smaller communities of sort of super fans, I guess. Not like, I wouldn't say like super fans isn't like a derogatory thing, like, oh my God, we're like obsessed with you. Just like creating people that like want to listen to your music. Like, there's so many artists I'd be a super fan of and would love to, and would buy directly from them, like happily not go via like labels and Spotify or whatever. And so I started putting on these like unique spaces tour, where I basically just reached out to all our fans and said, does anyone have a space that I could come and play? And so we ended up playing, and I just bought these like big Fender speaker thing that you just turn up, literally turn them around, plug them in, and basically could put on a gig anywhere. And we ended up playing on like a boat in Berlin,
Nice.
like up in the mountains in Switzerland. Can't remember where else we played. Just someone's like back garden, which I know you do a lot in Oz. There's like backyard shows.
Yeah, I feel like it pays to be a super fan of you then, if you're doing shows like that. That's awesome.
It was wicked. It was so good. But also I'd say like it's definitely a way to build a loyal fan base, and like they're going to support you if you've gone and played a show in their garden, or like one of their friends has turned up to the garden and you're playing to like 50 people. They're forever going to come to your shows in whenever you're touring that area, because they've seen you in such like an intimate space. And they might more likely to buy merch there. So actually you can create like a great little business.
Yes, absolutely, definitely.
Rather than getting paid. Like if you go through a promoter and play to 50 people in Birmingham, you're lucky if you get 100 quid from it, and it's not worth your time. Whereas if you can go directly to the fans who want to support you and don't want to support the big beast of the industry, then I feel like it's a nice little thing that could grow.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's awesome. That's real good advice. And just like, yeah, no, that's fantastic. I did love the backyard segment. The first local gig that I think I actually saw in Adelaide was like in a backyard, in someone's backyard. I think it's in my friend's backyard, and we had only literally just started like a band ourselves. I was the bass player in an indie band, and we'd only just started off. And then yeah, I think someone knew someone else who knew our lead singer. He's like, yeah, this is like a gig in someone's backyard that's like a 5 minute drive from where we were like just practicing. I'm like, yeah, sounds cool, whatever. And then, yeah, it's literally just walked up to this house party, and there was just like bands playing in the in the backyard in like the hills of Adelaide. And like, this is homegrown shit. This is homegrown. This is the
So
good
good.
stuff. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's such a fun vibe, and like it's. I mean, obviously, I don't think the cops showed up because I think the noise was okay. But sometimes I think maybe like if it gets a bit loud, they'll sort of like make their presence known.
totally. Yeah, for sure. But yeah, as like a singer-songwriter, it's 100% the way to go. Even just like putting on a little thing for your mates in the back garden, get 50 people along, put on like a
Mm.
barbecue or whatever, bring some beers and film it, get some content out of it as well.
Mm.
It's I'd say like homegrown is, I feel like that's maybe the way to go if you're starting out, and
Mm.
maybe even if you're further down the line, just create your own thing and stick to it, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's incredible advice. I really do appreciate you sharing that with me, and obviously sharing it with the listeners. I think they'll be able to really sort of like, yeah, tune into that and kind of like give themselves some new ideas of how to like, go in different directions that other artists may not be going in. So no, that's really wonderful. I'd love to branch off into your music because it's obviously such a soothing kind of style of music. Like I feel like it's music you could kind of like almost meditate to, almost like that could help people kind of like I guess fall asleep or something like as well. Like in a good way, in a very way. But it's just it cries. There's like lots of life in it. I really like it. Is the style of music that you play in your solo stuff, is that music that you've always sort of liked to play? Is it something that you've always sort of had a liking of? Or is it kind of just something that like I guess just sort of started to work for you as you sort of tried to find your sound?
Definitely stuff I've liked playing. Have forever written around. Just basically, I bought two guitar pedals when I was like 21, like a reverb and a delay pedal, and I
Nice.
still use the exact same pedals, and it just
No way.
creates this like ambient vibe that I love writing around. And
Mm,
yeah, I listen, definitely inspired by a lot of like I love people like Ryex and
mm,
like Ben Howard, Daughter, like bands like that,
mhm.
who sort of create this like expansive, reverbed, emotive soundscape, I guess. But I like grew up listening to electronic music and have forever loved like deep house music. And
Mm.
I think that weirdly, that's my biggest inspiration, the sort of vibe that DJs create in those nights where they just sort of take you on this journey of
Yeah.
like do you ever go to that? Do you go to like house nights or like DJ nights?
I used to when I was much younger. Like we used to like back in the day, especially around like the high school times and stuff. Like when techno was kind of getting really big, you had like Skrillex and like that kind of stuff. I mainly went to back in the day, but I definitely do understand what you mean. Like, I'm not gonna be able to remember any of the band, like any of the artist names now. I think Dead Mouse Five was one that I actually really quite liked back in the day too.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, when it definitely gets to that sort of late end of the night, and most times you've had a few like vodkas or whatever, you kind of like a bit phased out. But then yeah, like it's quite an emotive sound, quite a deep sound. It really does sort of transform sort of like the atmosphere around you. Um,
Yeah,
and yeah, no, I definitely understand where you're coming from. It's not a feeling that I've had like recently. Maybe I should go to a house night and sort of like rediscover it and
100%.
reconnect it. But no,
Yeah.
I definitely understand where you're going with that for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, when you're like locked in with your mates, you've got like a little crew, and just the vibes are sky high, and the DJ just takes you on this
Mm.
journey for like 3 hours. It's the greatest feeling in the world, and I sort of try and bring that to my almost where that side of my passion lies and meets
Mm.
the acoustic stuff. I sort of want to create that. There's like elements of like floating synth pads that just lay throughout the set, and those sort of emotive vocals and like pulsy kick drums, and
Cool.
yeah, try and like marry the two, and yeah, see if I can create something in between in
That's
between. But
fantastic.
it's really hard when it's your own thing. It's hard to see how others see it. So I don't know if people are like, what the hell are you talking about? There's nothing like that.
Yeah. No, that's awesome, man. I think I think it works in a really nice way. And even with like, the lyrics and just even the way that like, because you've got, again, such a soothing voice as well that just adds layers to the songs already. I'd love to ask you about the lyrics actually. When it comes to just like, writing songs and sort of like putting the lyrics into your songs, do you write kind of like about kind of stories, or is it more so about yourself personally, or is it about other people? Like, how do you sort of come up with the ideas for your songs?
Bit of both, really.
Mhm.
Yes, I've forever just sort of written from my own point of view, and then I sort of kept finding that I was writing similar things, and so
Mm.
thought maybe I've sort of exhausted my my life to
At
write
that
about
point,
them.
yeah,
Really.
at that point, like, oh shit,
Yeah,
I need to channel something else right now to get that
yeah,
going.
yeah. So I started trying to like watch people a lot more. Like on, if I was out and about, I'd just sort
Mm.
of go and sit and watch maybe couples sat on a bench, and I like to sort of come up with stories about maybe what they're talking about just by looking at their body language, or like, but yeah, anything really. I started reading a bit of like Greek mythology and writing about stories
Oh,
about that.
nice.
It's quite interesting. Yeah, I was reading about my latest song, State Line, is about, it's sort
Mm.
of like this nostalgic look back into summers of youth, of sort of young love and the innocence of youth. And
Right.
was reading about nostalgia. The word nostos means to return, and algos means suffering. And so
Right.
it's sort of the suffering of returning. And I was
Wow.
trying to work out if it's like the suffering of wanting to go back to a feeling, or the
Mm.
suffering and not be able to get there, or the
Yeah.
suffering of going back to that feeling. And so I've always thought nostalgia was like a really positive thing. And I was talking to my friend the other day who was like, no, I think it's like a sad thing. And so
Man,
it's like very interesting. So
that's very
yeah, I was just trying to
interesting.
work out. What do you think? Do you think it's positive or negative
I
nostalgia?
think it's straight. It's really hard to say. Like there's a lot of nostalgia in the current day, just even in the present day. I've found recently, like there's a lot of things that people are sort of trying to compare to things from back in the day because they obviously missed that and they're trying to get it out of like things they see these days. And it's strange. Like, I mean, I love nostalgia. Nostalgia is lovely. It can really take you back to that time, but I don't think it's something that we should like sort of sit in for too long because it does, I think, give that same sensibility of like, you're in a place where you want to kind of go back, but you can't get there. So you sort of just appreciate what it was, but then you're still kind of trying to move forward into the next thing. Because yeah, I think when it comes to sort of sitting in it for too long, that's when it can kind of get a little bit more like you're suffering. Like you can't get there, and you kind of want to get there, but it's like you can't because it's like it's a different thing. But yeah, even with even with like modern day, especially with like movies and stuff, like I feel like there's a lot of what do they call it? Like sort of fan service, I suppose, where it's like a lot of people are trying to make the fans happy by giving them things from like back in the day and sort of recreating them in a modernized way because they nostalgically miss them a lot. And sometimes that can be a good thing and sometimes that can be a bad thing. It's like, the I guess like it's a bad example because I haven't watched any of them, but like the live Disney remakes from movies, right? Like every single classic Disney movie that was in like, animational form is now getting recreated into a live action sense.
Right.
And it's kind of like, in a way, it's like, yeah, we're going to bring these movies back because they were nostalgic to you guys and now we're going to bring them back in a live action way. And it's like, that's cool, but they're not exactly done in the ways that we remember them. So it's kind of like, in that sense, it's nice, but it's also kind of flawed in a way. But
Yeah.
it's exciting to think about. It's exciting to talk about, exciting to think about. But yeah, I think personally, like it's nice to sort of have those little nostalgic moments, but not sort of sit in it too long because that's when, as I said, I think that suffering, as you're talking about, can kind of take over a little bit more.
Interesting. Yeah, I love it. It's yeah, definitely something I'm just going to raise in the pub with everyone all the time and see. I think
Oh,
I'm sort of starting to think about writing another album, and that
mm,
was the turning point of. I was like, I would love it to just be an entire thing about sort of nostalgia and like old times, maybe positive things, maybe negative things, and just sort of see if you can transport the listener to think about
mm,
past for them, and maybe if that's, and take them on a bit of a journey, and maybe that's yeah, maybe that's harking back to the good old days in a good way, or sort of an emotive return back to a feeling maybe there once was.
Personally, I think that's an amazing idea. I think that's a really good idea and like concept for an album, especially with your kind of music. Because I feel like I don't know there's something that's really kind of opening about that. I think, and like I personally, even when you literally just said it, I was like, man, that's a fucking real good idea. I would listen to that, and like especially if you like create it in such a way that you could have those really nice moments, the positive nostalgic moments, and then they intertwines it with maybe the not as positive sort of nostalgic moments. But then like you can sort of play around with it and maybe make it like a full circle sort of deal where it can kind of I don't know. I'm like thinking of it right now, and honestly, I think it's a great idea because like you've had because you've done one album before, right? You've had the one album, and then like a smattering of like singles and such, right?
Yeah, just yeah, I did wrote the album in lockdown, and
Mm.
yeah, I just forever sort of done. Sorry, put that one silent. To rookie.
Oh,
Um,
good.
I have forever, yeah, just done like singles and EPs because I've just enjoyed writing singles, and just I loved like how EPs are just little snapshots in time, and you can do like a little acoustic EP that you wrote in Berlin, and that's just released, and
Oh.
then you can make like a completely different sound for the next EP.
Mm.
So yeah, I really enjoyed doing that, but I think now maybe I'd quite like to write the next album. I've got a playlist on Spotify called Second Album Syndrome, which is just sort of some
Nice.
various influences of things that are just sort of getting my mind wandering a bit. So
Yeah.
yeah, the plans are in motion, but yeah, not much further than just sort of thinking about it. I think I've written the opening song, and that was sort of what got me thinking.
Yeah, no, I love what you just said, like snapshots of sounds with the EP. I think that's awesome. You have a way with words, and I like that. That's no, it's really
I think
cool.
I just mumble and my mind wanders quite a long time, and I
I
forget
that
what I was talking about.
that's just I guess that's just how like creatives kind of work. We just sort of go from one thing to the next, and we're like, oh, cool. It's one of those things though where like one thing I do love about doing these episodes with guests, especially guests I've never met before, is that you really do get a chance to sort of explore one's mind, and you sort of get to see how they kind of just like react and sort of what path they might wander off into. And sometimes it's great because you can sort of see it, and then they kind of realize where they've gone. They're like, "Oh, I've wandered all the way into this part of the conversation," and it's quite fun because sometimes it's not something that they would do every day or like sort of regularly. So it's always quite fun when that kind of moment happens. And we've definitely had that moment today, which is like fantastic. But no, I think that's a really cool way of going about sort of doing EPs and singles, having like little snapshots of sounds of just little fun moments that you can sort of put together. And then I guess when it comes to doing like a big project or writing like a full length like sort of conceptual album, that's where like I guess the work sort of really sort of intertwines and comes into like a full sort of story. But then again, it's cool to not have full stories all the time and just have like these little snapshots of little bits of brilliance, I suppose, that you can just sort of throw in there every now and then.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's quite that daunting writing an album. The first one was easy to write because it was
Mm,
writing about my entire life up till that point, and
yeah.
songs that I had on the back burner, and just sort of wanted to flesh out and make them into the sound that became the album. But yeah, I
Yeah.
have unbelievably fond memories of making the album. It was an incredible time. It was like obviously a horrific time in the world with lockdowns
Mm,
and stuff, but
yeah.
it was like we built a studio with my best mate. We built a studio up in
Oh,
this
sick.
farmhouse, and just like the sun shone, the waves were pumping, and we just go surfing, come into the studio, and had no like time pressure on it because no one knew if anything was ever going to happen again. So we were
Yeah,
like,
it's so true. There's no like constraints or anything like that because you just went in and just kind of did it. Dude, that's awesome. That's like the
it's
best way
wicked.
to do it.
It really was. It was, yeah, I still like, I get very like emotional whenever I think about the time. The title is called Under the Mackerel Sky, which is
That's
this,
right.
we get these like beautiful skies. You get them everywhere in the world, but I always
Mm.
say we get them in Cornwall. But I was reading this poem by a guy called John Betjeman, who was
Yep.
a poet who wrote beautifully about the area that I live in. And was reading this thing about a mackerel sky and had no idea what that was, and looked deeper into it, and it's sort of these like, it just looks like mackerel scales across the sky, and it normally means, like, to sea folk, like a fishermen and stuff, it means a change is coming. So it's sort of a sign that maybe a storm is coming. But
Oh right, yeah, that's right. That's like the when it's like, oh, it's was like red in the morning, sailor's warning, or something like that. I think my first boss,
red sky at night.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think my first boss when I like worked in landscaping told me that, because we used to start like really early in the morning, and like so if we started early in the morning and there was like a red sort of like
Gonna
mackerel
rain
sky, yeah, he'd throw that mannerism out. I'm like, oh yeah, nice, cool, man.
Yeah, it's definitely gonna rain later. But yeah, it was yeah, that I kind of liked the idea that maybe a change was coming in the world rather than in the weather, and that has just become this like overarching theme that I played a song. I wrote a song called Under the Mackerel Sky as well, and been playing that live at the moment, and it's sort of, it's like taken on a life of its own, and it's been like really epic. And just every time I play it, I can't think that I've ever had such a time with a song that I'm just like completely transfixed and transported to that moment. And yeah, it feels unbelievably epic. I'm really enjoying playing.
Hell yeah,
playing that.
That's fantastic, man. It's so good just to be able to, like, again, just write really emotive music and put it out to people, and then feel that when you put it out to them. But even when they receive it and they bring it back to you, it's just, oh, you cannot describe it. It's just awesome. I would love to finish off asking you about your newest, well, one of the newest singles that you did. You wrote it while you were on tour in Australia.
Yeah, it was. I was touring with my friend Ziggy in Oz, and yes, as you probably know, like touring Australia is the long roads, and sort of you just sort of see nothing for quite a long time, and it's
there's a lot of nothing in Australia sometimes.
yeah, but there's sort of a beauty in that as well, and I feel like I have this like image of Oz whenever I think of it, and it's that sort of like beautiful evening light, and it's very sort of golden in my mind and sunsetty, even though I guess you're on the East Coast, but I sort of associate it with that light. And was just sort of playing around with some guitar chords and played these. It's basically the verse is like two chords, and then the chorus is two different chords, and it just felt very like hypnotic, and that sort of felt like this like hypnotic time on the road we had that was just like, you know, when you just see the same thing. And
I know about
that. And just sort of driving up the road in Oz is like 8 hours. But it was it was written about, I felt sort of very like young and carefree, because we were just on this adventure playing music, surfing, and it was epic. And that sort of got me thinking about this like nostalgia, like thinking back to my youth. And I think when I think of my youth, I think of these like trips down to Cornwall as with my parents and brother, and just that's my like overarching theme. It's almost this like golden tinged view of my youth, of just that light, and that's sort of what I wanted to create with the song. And it was sort of like the innocence of youth, and being carefree, like nothing to worry about. And that's sort of what the song's about. And
Sweet.
And I was also reading that the Greek mythology story about Icarus, which was I think against all advice flew too close to the sun, and his wings melted, fell to his demise. And sort of talking about I guess like your dreams when you're a youth, which there's no limit to them, because you just sort of can dream up the maddest things, and you think they're possible because you've never been told they're not. And I guess it's like running away with your dreams and then getting too high, and you meet this thing which being the sun telling you can't do that, and you sort of fall back to
earth,
back to reality. But I guess that's like youth meeting adult life. Like youth, you have this carefree, unending ability to dream, and then in adult life, you have the ability, and then you start dreaming, and then you're like, I actually know that's not possible because of all this experience in my life, and that's a shame. And so I think it's maybe a reminder to go back to the carefree dreaming of youth.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can tell you that much. Like, if you go a bit too close to the sun in Australia in the summertime, then you will actually melt, because it gets like 40 degrees and it's fucking hot. But no, that's such a wonderful like such a wonderful way to like sort of put that song together, and even just to explain it. Yeah, I was almost kind of mesmerized a little bit through that entire thing. I was like, man, this is like some real good stuff. This is like, this guy really thinks about what he's putting into his songs, and he really thinks about the story behind it and like what he writes into it. And it's fantastic because, you know, sometimes songs can kind of just come out of nowhere, and you just sort of, I've written songs where you just write them and you're like, oh, it gets pieced together so well and so easily. But like when you've really got yourself in a really nice state where, you know, you're really opening your mind and thinking about like everything around you, especially if you are in another country and you're sort of going back to some nostalgic stuff, you can really pull out some really wonderful, carefree kind of feelings that then obviously get included in your songs. And when you play those songs live, I expect, hopefully, for the rest of the tour, that everyone that hears those songs can relate to them and also feel those sort of like same tendencies that you did when you wrote the songs.
Yeah, I hope so too. I sort of play that song halfway through the set at the moment, and it's definitely a change in the vibe. You see people bopping around, and you're like, okay, this is a vibe for sure. And so I sort of see that's like a cornerstone in the set at the moment, and it's hopefully it'll keep going, but we'll see.
100%. Well, Nathan, this has been such an amazing conversation. Again, I can't thank you enough for joining me here today, talking about all of your music and all of that. And I really appreciate it. It was amazing to meet you and amazing to talk to you. To all of my listeners, please do listen to Nathan Bull, all his music. He's got so much there, so you're not going to go like empty for sure. I really wish you all the best on the rest of your tour, even though it's all converging all together with all the other stuff. Hopefully nothing goes wrong. Don't quote me on that. But I do wish you all the best in the rest of your tour. And I also wish you all the best in the rest of your musical journey.
Thanks, man. Thanks so much for having me.